I was sitting on my back porch in Asheville, North Carolina, drinking my morning coffee when I noticed the construction crew setting up equipment near the edge of my property. The sound of heavy machinery breaking the peaceful silence made my stomach drop. I set down my mug and walked across the dewy grass toward the commotion, my bare feet getting soaked in the process. "Hey, what's going on here?" I called out to a man in a hard hat who appeared to be directing the operation. He glanced at me briefly, then back at his clipboard. "HOA fuel station installation. Should be done in about 6 weeks." My heart started racing. "What? This is my property." "Not according to the survey we have from the HOA," he said, pulling out a folded document from his back pocket. "This whole area here is designated as community space. You must be one of the homeowners nearby. Don't worry, you'll have access just like everyone else." I took the paper from him, my hands trembling slightly as I examined it. The survey looked official enough, complete with stamps and signatures from someone named Patricia Hendricks, the HOA president. But something felt terribly wrong. These woods had been part of my property when I bought the place 3 years ago. I inherited it from my uncle, actually, and I remembered the original surveys quite clearly. "Listen, I need you to stop work immediately," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's been a mistake." The foreman shrugged. "Can't do that, buddy. We got permits, payments, and a schedule. Take it up with your HOA if you got issues." I stormed back to my house, which sat on 15 acres of beautiful North Carolina woodland. My name is Quentin Xavier, and I'm a software developer who works remotely, which gave me the freedom to live out here in the first place. I'd specifically chosen this property because it was private, secluded, and perfect for someone who values peace and quiet. I immediately called the HOA office, and after being transferred 3 times, I finally got through to Patricia herself. "Mr. Xavier, I'm aware of your concerns," she said in a voice dripping with condescension. "But the matter has been settled. The community voted, and we've determined that unused woodland should be utilized for the benefit of all residents. Patricia, that's my land. You can't just vote to take someone's private property. According to our records, it's common area. Perhaps you should review your deed more carefully. We've had surveyors out there multiple times and they've confirmed the boundaries. Then your surveyors are wrong or lying or both." She let out an exaggerated sigh. "Mr. Xavier, I understand change can be difficult, but this fuel station will increase all our property values. It's a modern amenity that our community desperately needs. The nearest gas station is 12 miles away. So build it on actual HOA land. We are. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. I walked to my home office, which was really just a converted bedroom, and started digging through my filing cabinet. It took me 20 minutes to find the folder with all my property documents from when I inherited the place. There it was. The original survey from 2019, conducted by Henderson Land Surveying, clearly showing that my property extended well beyond where they were planning to build. In fact, the construction site was a good 300 feet inside my boundary line. I pulled out the HOA's survey again and compared them side by side. Someone had deliberately altered the property lines or commissioned a fraudulent survey. The question was whether Patricia knew it was fake or had been duped herself. I called Henderson Land Surveying and spoke with Martha Henderson, the owner. She remembered my uncle well. "Oh yes, the Xavier property. Beautiful piece of land. What can I help you with?" I explained the situation, sending her photos of both surveys via email while we talked. "That's absolutely falsified," she said after reviewing them. Our survey is registered with the county, and those boundary markers should still be in place. Someone's trying to pull a fast one on you, Mr. Xavier. Can you come out and verify the boundaries again? I need documentation solid enough to hold up in court if necessary. I can be there tomorrow morning at 9, and Mr. Xavier, you might want to get a lawyer involved. This isn't just a property dispute. If they're knowingly building on your land with a fake survey, that's fraud. After hanging up with Martha, I contacted James Mitchell, a real estate attorney in Asheville who came highly recommended. His paralegal scheduled me for later that afternoon. The next morning, I watched from my porch as the construction crew continued their work, now with concrete trucks arriving to pour the foundation. Part of me wanted to physically stop them, but I knew that would only make things worse. Instead, I waited for Martha Henderson to arrive. She showed up in a pickup truck with her equipment, accompanied by a younger assistant. "Let's see what we're dealing with," she said, already pulling out her surveying tools. It took them 3 hours, but Martha and her assistant located all the original boundary markers, most of them buried under years of fallen leaves and undergrowth. Every single one confirmed what I already knew. The construction site was completely on my property. "I'll have a full report ready by tomorrow afternoon," Martha said, "but there's no question about it. That's your land, Mr. Xavier, every inch of it. Can you explain something to me? How does another surveying company just fake this?" Martha frowned. "I don't recognize the company name on that survey the HOA provided you. Brunson Surveying. I've been in this business for 30 years and I've never heard of them. My guess. They either don't exist or they're not licensed in North Carolina. Someone probably just created an official-looking document." That afternoon, I met with James Mitchell in his downtown Asheville office. He was a sharp-dressed man in his 50s with gray hair and an impressive collection of legal books lining his walls. "This is quite a situation," he said after reviewing everything. "The good news is you have clear ownership. The bad news is they've already started construction, which complicates removal costs and damages. What's my best move here?" "We send them a cease and desist immediately, backed by the legitimate survey. We also file an injunction to stop construction while we sort this out. If they continue anyway, they're in contempt. And honestly, Mr. Xavier, I think we should also file a formal complaint with the district attorney's office. This looks like intentional fraud." "You think Patricia knew?" James leaned back in his chair. "Hard to say without investigation. But either she's complicit or someone in her organization is. Either way, the HOA is liable." Over the next 2 days, James worked quickly. He sent the cease and desist to Patricia Hendricks via certified mail and email. He also sent copies to the construction company and filed for an emergency injunction with the county court. The construction didn't stop. When I confronted the foreman again, he just shook his head. "Look, man, I got my orders from the HOA. They say the survey is good, they got permits I build. You got a problem, settle it in court. I can't just shut down a $50,000 project because one neighbor is complaining." "That's fine," I said calmly. "But when this is proven to be my property, your company is going to be liable for all damages." He laughed. "Sure, buddy. Whatever you say." I pulled out my phone and took photos of everything: the workers, the equipment, the partially completed foundation, all of it. I documented dates and times. If this was going to court, I wanted an airtight case. The injunction hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. In the meantime, Patricia called me personally. "Mr. Xavier, you're being unreasonable," she said without preamble. "We've invested significant HOA funds into this project based on proper surveys and legal counsel. If you continue this frivolous lawsuit, we'll have no choice but to countersue for damages and legal fees. Patricia, that's my land. I have a legitimate survey proving it. You have an old survey. Ours is current. Yours is fake. The surveying company doesn't even exist. There was a pause. That's a serious accusation. It's a fact. Check the North Carolina Licensing Board. There's no Brunson surveying registered in this state. Another pause, longer this time. I'll have to look into that. You do that. And while you're at it, stop construction before this gets even more expensive for everyone. The construction continues, Mr. Xavier. See you in court. She hung up. The following Monday, I arrived at the Buncombe County Courthouse with James Mitchell. Patricia was there with the HOA's attorney, a slick-looking guy named Richard Vanderburg, who wore a suit that probably cost more than my car. The judge, Honorable Sarah Whitmore, reviewed our filings before the hearing began. Mr. Vanderburg, I've reviewed the surveys from both parties, Judge Whitmore said, peering over her reading glasses. Can you explain why the HOA's survey comes from a company that doesn't appear to be licensed in North Carolina? Vanderburg shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, I was provided that survey by my client. I had no reason to doubt its authenticity. But you didn't verify it. I trusted that the HOA had done their due diligence. Judge Whitmore turned to Patricia. Mrs. Hendricks, where did you obtain this survey? Patricia stood up, looking flustered. It was provided to us by a consultant we hired to assess the property situation. His name is Robert Chen. And where is Mr. Chen? I don't know, Your Honor. He was a contractor who did several jobs for us last year. Judge Whitmore looked unimpressed. Mrs. Hendricks, are you aware that building on someone else's property with a fraudulent survey could constitute criminal fraud? Patricia's face went pale. Your Honor, I had no idea it was fraudulent. Mr. Chen came highly recommended. He provided all the documentation. We paid him $7,000 for his services. Did you verify any of this with the county records? I assumed he had. James spoke up. Your Honor, the county records clearly show the Henderson survey from 2019 is the official boundary documentation. It's been registered for years. Anyone doing even basic due diligence would have found it. Judge Whitmore nodded slowly. I'm granting the injunction. All construction stops immediately, effective now. Mrs. Hendricks, you need to contact your construction company right away. Furthermore, I'm ordering both parties to attend mediation within the next 2 weeks to determine damages and resolution. If this isn't resolved satisfactorily, we'll be back here for a full hearing. She banged her gavel. We walked out of the courthouse, and I felt a wave of relief. At least the construction would stop, but Patricia intercepted us in the hallway. Her face was red, and she looked furious. You've embarrassed this HOA in front of a judge, she hissed. Even if you're right about the property lines, we've already invested $40,000. That money comes from every homeowner in this community. Then you shouldn't have built on my land without proper verification, I said. We'll fight this, she said. We'll tie you up in court for years if we have to. James stepped forward. Mrs. Hendricks, I'd strongly advise against that approach. Your HOA is already on shaky legal ground. If you continue to be combative, my client will have no choice but to pursue maximum damages, including emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive damages for the fraudulent survey. Patricia stormed off without another word. That afternoon, I watched with satisfaction as the construction crew packed up their equipment. The foreman gave me a wave as they drove off. Sorry about the confusion, he called out. For what it's worth, you were right. The next 2 weeks were tense. I started receiving nasty letters from neighbors who were on the HOA board or friendly with Patricia. They accused me of being selfish, of not thinking about the community, of making life difficult for everyone. Someone even left a bag of dog waste on my porch. But I also received support. Several neighbors reached out privately to say they'd always thought Patricia overstepped her authority, and they were glad someone was finally standing up to her. The mediation was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon at a neutral location, a conference room in a lawyer's office in downtown Asheville. James and I arrived first. Patricia showed up with Richard Vanderberg, and to my surprise, 2 other HOA board members, Michael Prescott and Linda Forrester. The mediator, a retired judge named Harold Gibson, laid out the ground rules and then asked each side to present their case. James went first, methodically presenting our evidence. The original survey, the verified boundary markers, the fraudulent survey from the non-existent company, photos of the construction on my property, and a detailed accounting of damages we were seeking, which totaled $92,000. $92,000, Patricia practically shouted. That's absurd. Let's break it down, James said calmly. $40,000 for the construction that needs to be removed, $20,000 in property damage and restoration, $15,000 in legal fees so far, $17,000 for loss of use and enjoyment of property. That's $92,000, and honestly, that's conservative. We could easily justify twice that with punitive damages. Vanderberg spoke up. The HOA simply doesn't have that kind of money. Our reserve fund is only $45,000. That's not my client's problem, James replied. Your organization built on his property with a fake survey. Actions have consequences. Harold Gibson raised his hand. Let's take a step back, Mrs. Hendricks, help me understand how this happened. You mentioned a consultant, Robert Chen. Patricia nodded, looking tired now rather than angry. Last year, we wanted to add amenities to improve property values. Robert came recommended by a friend in another HOA in Charlotte. He seemed knowledgeable and professional. He did a full analysis of our community, including identifying what he called underutilized community spaces. One of them was the woodland area adjacent to Mr. Xavier's property. Did he tell you it was community property? Gibson asked. Yes. He provided the survey and said the previous HOA administration had never properly utilized their assets. He made it seem like we were just reclaiming what was already ours. Did you not think to verify this with the county? Patricia's voice dropped. No, I trusted him. That was clearly a mistake. A mistake that's going to cost your community dearly, Gibson said. Let me ask you this. Can you contact Robert Chen now? No. His phone number doesn't work anymore. His email bounces back. It's like he disappeared. Gibson looked at Vanderberg. Did you try to track him down? We hired a private investigator, Vanderberg admitted. The address he provided was a UPS store mailbox. The business license was fake. Robert Chen might not even be his real name. We think he was running a scam, possibly targeting multiple HOAs. I felt a surge of anger. So you're saying some con artist set this whole thing up, took your money and left you holding the bag? It appears so, Vanderberg said. Which is why we're asking for leniency. The HOA was victimized here too. James shook his head. The HOA was negligent. There's a difference. My client is the real victim. He's had his property invaded, his peace disrupted, and now he's stuck with a partially built gas station foundation on his land that needs to be removed. We went back and forth for 2 hours. Patricia and the board members tried to negotiate the damages down, arguing poverty and ignorance. James held firm on most points but showed some flexibility. Finally, we reached an agreement. The HOA would pay $75,000 total. They'd remove all construction materials, and restore the land to its original condition at their expense. They'd issue a formal written apology to be distributed to all HOA members. And Patricia Hendricks would resign as HOA president within 30 days. Patricia looked devastated at that last point. "That's not fair. I didn't intentionally defraud anyone." "You failed in your fiduciary duty to the HOA members," Gibson said firmly. "You authorized a major construction project without proper verification. Whether intentional or not, that's grounds for removal. Take the deal or risk going to court where you could face personal liability." She signed the agreement. Over the next month, I watched as the construction materials were removed and the land was restored. It wasn't perfect. The area where they'd poured concrete had to be completely excavated, but they brought in topsoil and replanted native vegetation. A landscaping company spent 3 days making it look as natural as possible. The $75,000 was paid in installments. The HOA had to take out a loan to cover the difference between their reserves and what they owed me, which meant every homeowner's dues were going up for the next 5 years. This did not make me popular in the neighborhood. I received more angry letters. Someone keyed my car. Another neighbor stopped talking to me entirely, giving me dirty looks whenever we passed on the road. But here's the thing. I didn't care. I was right, and I wasn't going to be bullied into accepting something wrong just to keep the peace. Patricia did resign, though she sent a bitter email to all HOA members claiming she was forced out by one unreasonable homeowner who cared more about property lines than community spirit. The email conveniently left out the part about the fraudulent survey and illegal construction. James advised me to let it go. "You won. Don't get dragged into a public relations war." About 6 weeks after the settlement was finalized, I got a call from Detective Ryan Wallace with the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. "Mr. Xavier, I'm calling about the case involving your property and the HOA construction. We've been investigating Robert Chen, or whoever he really is, and we've discovered he ran this scam on at least 4 other HOAs across North Carolina and Virginia. Total damages are estimated at over $300,000. Have you caught him? Not yet, but we're close. We've identified his real name, David Brunson, and we have warrants out for his arrest. I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to testify if we catch him and this goes to trial." "Absolutely." "Good. I also wanted to inform you that we may be charging Mrs. Hendricks with negligence. That surprised me." "Really?" "The district attorney is reviewing the case." While she was clearly conned, her failure to do basic due diligence before authorizing construction on disputed property rises to a level of negligence that might be criminal. I can't say more than that right now, but you may be contacted by the DA's office. After we hung up, I sat thinking about Patricia. Was she a victim or a perpetrator? Both, maybe. She'd been scammed by a con artist, but she'd also been arrogant and careless, too eager to push through her agenda without proper verification. 2 months later, in late fall, I got another call from Detective Wallace. We got him. David Brunson was arrested in Tennessee trying to run the same scam on an HOA in Nashville. He's being extradited back to North Carolina to face multiple fraud charges. That's great news. There's more. He's agreed to cooperate and provide information about other potential targets in exchange for a plea deal. Turns out he's been doing this for 3 years, targeting HOAs specifically, because they often have reserve funds and board members who don't always do their homework. What's going to happen to him? Even with cooperation, he's looking at 5 to 10 years. He defrauded a lot of people out of a lot of money. I felt a sense of justice at that. The man who'd caused all this chaos would finally face consequences. The following week, I received a subpoena to testify before a grand jury regarding Patricia Hendricks. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Carol Benson, met with me beforehand to go over my testimony. "We're considering charges of criminal negligence and misappropriation of HOA funds," she explained. "Mrs. Hendricks authorized the expenditure of $40,000 without proper verification of property ownership. That's a serious breach of fiduciary duty." "Do you think she knew the survey was fake?" I asked. "No, I don't think she knew. But ignorance isn't a defense when you're in a position of responsibility. If a bank manager authorizes a fraudulent loan because they didn't bother to verify the paperwork, they're still liable." The grand jury hearing was brief. I testified about the timeline of events, the surveys, and the construction. Other witnesses included Martha Henderson, who explained how the fake survey differed from legitimate ones, and two HOA members who testified about Patricia's management style and how she often pushed projects through without proper board oversight. A week later, Patricia Hendricks was indicted on 1 count of criminal negligence and 1 count of misappropriation of funds. Each carried a potential sentence of up to 3 years in prison. Her arraignment made the local news. I watched on TV as she arrived at the courthouse with her lawyer, looking defeated and much older than I remembered. She pleaded not guilty. The trial was scheduled for the following spring. In the meantime, life slowly returned to normal for me. The woods were restored, though you could still see where the construction had been if you knew where to look. The HOA elected a new president, Michael Prescott, who seemed much more reasonable and competent. He actually called me to apologize personally. "Mr. Xavier, I want you to know that I reviewed all the documentation, and you were absolutely in the right. Patricia should have verified everything before proceeding. I'm sorry you had to go through this." "I appreciate that, Michael. I also want to assure you that we've implemented new procedures. Any future project over $10,000 requires independent verification from at least 2 sources, plus county record checks. This won't happen again." "That's good to hear." Winter came, and with it, snow blanketing the woods. I spent Christmas quietly, enjoying the peace and solitude I'd fought so hard to protect. A few neighbors had warmed back up to me, especially after the news about David Brunson's arrest and Patricia's indictment. They realized I wasn't the villain in this story. In March, Patricia's trial began. I attended as a witness, though I wasn't called until the second day. The prosecution laid out a clear case. Patricia had been negligent in her duties, had failed to verify critical information, and had authorized the expenditure of significant HOA funds on a project that was legally dubious from the start. Her defense attorney argued that she'd been deceived by a sophisticated con man, that she'd acted in what she believed were the best interests of the community, and that criminal charges were excessive for what amounted to poor judgment. When I took the stand, the prosecutor asked me to describe the events from my perspective. I told the truth as plainly as I could. The shock of discovering construction on my property, the frustration of dealing with Patricia's dismissive attitude, and the relief when the court finally stopped the illegal building. The defense attorney cross-examined me, trying to paint me as vindictive and unreasonable. "Mr. Xavier, isn't it true that you refused multiple attempts at compromise?" "No, that's not true. I refused to accept construction on my property, which is my right." "But you could have been more flexible about the situation." "How? It was my land. There was nothing to be flexible about." The trial lasted a week. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with a verdict: guilty on the negligence charge, not guilty on misappropriation. The judge scheduled sentencing for the following month. I was conflicted about the verdict. On one hand, Patricia had made my life hell for months. On the other, I didn't particularly enjoy watching someone's life fall apart, even if they'd brought it on themselves. At sentencing, Patricia made a statement to the court. She was crying, her voice shaking. "Your Honor, I know I made mistakes. I trusted someone I shouldn't have trusted. I didn't do my due diligence, but I never intended to hurt anyone or break the law. I thought I was helping my community. I've already lost my position, my reputation, and paid a severe financial penalty. I'm asking for mercy." Judge Whitmore, the same judge who'd granted the original injunction, looked at her sternly. "Mrs. Hendricks, you were in a position of trust and responsibility. The people in your community relied on you to make sound decisions with their money and their interests. You failed them spectacularly. However, I do believe you acted out of negligence rather than malice." She sentenced Patricia to 2 years in prison, suspended, meaning she wouldn't serve time unless she violated probation. She also ordered 300 hours of community service and a $5,000 fine. It was over. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that the legal saga was finally finished, satisfaction that justice had been served, but also exhaustion from the whole ordeal. James Mitchell walked with me to the parking lot. "You did good, Quentin. Not everyone would have stood their ground like you did. I just protected what was mine." "That's exactly right, and you held people accountable when they tried to take it. That matters." Life returned to normal slowly. Spring brought new growth to the woods, covering the last traces of the construction. I installed some trail cameras to keep an eye on the property, just in case anyone got any more ideas about using my land. The HOA, under Michael's leadership, actually improved. They fixed long-standing drainage issues in the community, repaved some of the roads, and generally became more responsive to homeowner concerns. The fuel station idea was dropped entirely, and honestly, nobody really missed it. I ran into Patricia once, about a year later, at a grocery store in Asheville. She looked thinner, tired, and she avoided eye contact when she saw me. I almost said something, almost extended some kind of olive branch, but decided against it. Some wounds don't heal with pleasantries. David Brunson, the con artist at the heart of it all, eventually pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. He was ordered to pay restitution to all his victims, though given that he'd already spent most of the money, nobody expected to see much of it. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons. First, always verify property boundaries before buying or developing land. Second, trust but verify everything, especially when someone presents you with official-looking documents. Third, stand up for your rights even when it's unpopular or difficult. 2 years after the whole mess started, I was back on my porch drinking morning coffee, listening to the birds in my woods. The property value had actually increased despite, or maybe because of, all the drama. The woods were pristine, protected, and legally confirmed as mine beyond any doubt. A new family moved in down the road and they stopped by to introduce themselves. The husband, a friendly guy named Tom, asked about the HOA. "Is it pretty active around here?" I smiled. "It used to be. These days it's pretty quiet. They learned their lesson about overstepping." "What lesson was that?" "Long story. But let's just say they're much more careful about respecting property boundaries now." He laughed, not knowing the half of it. As they walked back to their car, I thought about how close I'd come to just accepting the HOA's word, to believing their fake survey and giving up my land without a fight. So many people would have done that, would have assumed the official-looking paperwork was legitimate, would have backed down when threatened with lawsuits. But I didn't. I verified. I fought. I won. The woods behind my house were quiet except for the rustle of leaves and the occasional bird call. Exactly how I wanted it. Exactly how it should be. My property, my peace, my victory. I thought about all the other homeowners out there, dealing with overreaching HOAs, dealing with board members who think they have more authority than they actually do. I hoped my story would spread, would encourage others to stand their ground when they're right. The legal system worked eventually. It was slow, expensive, and frustrating, but it worked. The fraudster went to prison. The negligent HOA president faced consequences. The property was restored. Justice, in the end, prevailed. Michael Prescott, the new HOA president, actually instituted what he called the Xavier Protocols, a series of checks and balances designed to prevent another situation like mine. Any project affecting property near boundary lines required independent surveys from licensed companies. Any expenditure over $5,000 required a vote from all board members, not just the president. And all surveys had to be verified against county records before any action was taken. He asked me to present these protocols at an HOA meeting to explain from a homeowner's perspective why they were necessary. I agreed, though I won't lie. Walking into that meeting room with 25 homeowners staring at me was intimidating. Some still blamed me for their increased dues. But I stood at the front and told my story, start to finish. I explained how easy it had been for a con artist to fool the HOA board. I explained how Patricia's failure to verify had cost everyone money and created a massive legal mess. And I explained why these new protocols mattered. By the end, even the homeowners who'd been hostile seemed to understand. One older woman, Sandra, who'd been particularly cold to me before, actually approached me afterward. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I thought you were being difficult and selfish." I didn't understand that Patricia had cut corners and believed a fake survey. You were protecting all of us, in a way, by holding her accountable. I appreciate that, Sandra. I'm glad someone finally stood up to her. She ran this HOA like it was her personal fiefdom. Turns out, Patricia had alienated a lot of people over the years with her high-handed approach. My situation had just been the most dramatic example. Other homeowners started sharing their own stories of how she'd overruled them, ignored their concerns, or pushed through projects without proper input. The HOA actually became healthier after the whole ordeal, more transparent, more democratic, more careful. Sometimes it takes a crisis to force necessary changes. I also learned that 3 other HOAs in North Carolina had been targeted by David Brunson with similar scams. One in Durham had almost built a community swimming pool on property that belonged to the city. Another in Winston-Salem had nearly installed a playground on a protected wetland. Brunson's method was always the same: identify underutilized spaces, provide fake surveys showing they were community property, collect consulting fees, and disappear before the legal trouble started. He'd been smart about it too, always staying just under the radar, never scamming enough money from one place to trigger serious investigation. It was only when multiple victims started comparing notes that law enforcement connected the dots. Detective Wallace told me later that my quick action in verifying my survey and getting attorneys involved had actually helped break the case open. If I just rolled over and accepted the HOA's version of events, Brunson might still be out there scamming other communities. As months turned into years, the whole experience became just another chapter in my life story. The angry chapter, the frustrating chapter, but also the chapter where I learned I could stand up for myself and win. My software development career continued thriving. Working remotely from my peaceful woods in North Carolina gave me the creative space I needed. Ironically, the whole legal battle had taught me a lot about persistence and attention to detail, qualities that served me well professionally. I started dating someone I met at a coffee shop in Asheville. Her name was Gabriella Klein, and she was a landscape architect. When I told her the whole story about the HOA and the fuel station, she laughed so hard she nearly spit out her latte. "That's insane," she said. "I deal with surveys and property lines all the time in my work. The idea that anyone would just accept a random survey without verification is crazy." That's what I thought, but apparently it happens more than you'd think. My industry has a saying, "Trust the markers, not the paper." Physical evidence on the ground is always more reliable than documents that can be forged or faked. We started seeing each other regularly, and she actually helped me create a better landscape plan for the woods where the construction had been. We planted native species, created a small walking trail, and installed some benches. Turned the site of the conflict into something beautiful. One evening, about 3 years after the whole mess started, Gabriella and I were sitting on one of those benches, watching the sunset through the trees. "You know what's funny?" she said. "If Patricia had just knocked on your door and asked to verify the property lines before starting construction, none of this would have happened." That's exactly right. 5 minutes of communication could have saved everyone months of misery and thousands of dollars. Pride and ego. They mess up more projects than any other factors. I thought about that. Patricia's ego had told her she didn't need to verify, didn't need to check with me, didn't need to question her consultant. She'd been so convinced of her own authority and rightness that she'd steamrolled ahead. It reminded me of something my uncle used to say before he passed away and left me this property. "Measure twice, cut once." He'd been a carpenter, but the advice applied to everything. Do your homework. Verify your information, don't assume. The HOA eventually recovered financially from the debacle. The increased dues were painful but manageable, and after 5 years they returned to normal levels. The loan was paid off. The reserve fund was rebuilt. Life went on. Patricia moved away. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that she'd relocated to Florida to be near her daughter. She never served actual prison time thanks to her suspended sentence, but her reputation was ruined. Her career as an HOA president, which had apparently been her primary identity, was over. I didn't take pleasure in that. I didn't hate Patricia Hendricks. I just hated what she tried to do to my property. There's a difference. Michael Prescott remained HOA president for 6 years, then stepped down voluntarily to focus on his own business. The woman who replaced him, Jennifer Torres, was even better. She actually consulted homeowners before making decisions. Novel concept. The last I heard about David Brunson, he was serving his time in a federal facility in Kentucky. He'd apparently been a real estate agent before turning to fraud, which explained his knowledge of surveys and property documentation. Apparently he'd lost his real estate license after some ethical violations, decided the system was against him, and turned to scamming the same kinds of organizations he used to work with. Classic story of a person making terrible choices and blaming everyone but themselves. As for me, I'm still here in my house on my 15 acres of beautiful North Carolina woodland. The property value has increased significantly, partly because of the area's general growth, partly because pristine wooded lots are becoming rare, and partly because the whole legal battle actually increased awareness of my property's exact boundaries and value. Every morning I drink my coffee on the back porch and look out at those woods. The same woods that almost became a fuel station. The The same woods that sparked a legal war. The same woods that taught me about property rights, persistence, and the importance of documentation. I installed a small plaque on one of the trees near where the construction had been. It reads, "Measure twice, cut once. Original survey 2019. Verified 2023. Gabriella thought it was petty. I thought it was a reminder." We compromised by putting it on a tree that wasn't visible from the main trail, so only people who knew where to look would find it. The cameras I'd installed remained up, not because I expected more trouble, but because they'd helped me document wildlife in the area. I had footage of deer, foxes, a family of raccoons, and once, a black bear passing through. The bear was incredible, a huge male just ambling through like he owned the place. In a way, I guess he did. The woods didn't belong to me so much as I was their temporary steward. My name was on the deed, but the land itself would be there long after I was gone. Maybe that was why I'd fought so hard to protect it. It wasn't just about property rights or winning a legal battle. It was about preserving something beautiful and wild from being destroyed for a gas station that nobody really needed. I thought about all the ways the situation could have gone differently. If I'd been less attentive and not noticed the construction crew. If I hadn't kept my uncle's original survey documents. If Martha Henderson hadn't been available to verify the boundaries. If James Mitchell hadn't been a skilled attorney. If Judge Whitmore hadn't been fair and thorough. Any one of those things going wrong and I might have lost my woods to an illegal fuel station. The thought still gave me chills, but everything had gone right eventually. The system worked, justice prevailed, the land was protected. And I learned something important about HOAs that I wished more people understood. They have limited authority. They can create rules about things like lawn maintenance, noise levels, and architectural modifications. But they absolutely cannot take your property, no matter how many people vote for it. Your deed is your deed. Your land is your land. No HOA vote can change that, regardless of what some power-hungry board president might claim. I actually wrote an article about my experience for a property rights blog. It went viral in HOA skeptic communities, generating hundreds of comments from people with their own horror stories. Apparently, overreaching HOAs were a much bigger problem than I'd realized. Some stories were worse than mine. People who'd been fined thousands of dollars for trivial violations. People who'd been foreclosed on because they couldn't pay escalating HOA fees. People whose architectural requests had been denied for arbitrary reasons. The list went on. But my story had a happy ending which seemed to give people hope. Stand your ground. Verify everything. Fight when you're right. These simple principles could make a difference. Now, sitting here years later watching the sun set behind my trees, I felt genuinely at peace. The battle was over. The victory was complete. The land was safe. Gabriella squeezed my hand. "What are you thinking about? Just how lucky I am. This place, this piece almost got destroyed, but I fought for it and I won." "You did, and the woods are better for it." We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the evening sounds of the forest. Somewhere an owl hooted. Crickets began their nightly chorus. The temperature dropped a few degrees as the sun disappeared. This was worth fighting for. This peace, this beauty, this connection to nature. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. The fuel station that almost was, would never be. The woods remained woods. My property remained mine. And somewhere, hopefully, Patricia Hendricks had learned a valuable lesson about verifying information before acting. As darkness settled over the forest and we headed back to the house, I took one last look at the place where the construction had been. You really couldn't tell anymore. Nature had reclaimed it completely, as nature always does given time. The whole experience felt like a strange dream now, something that happened to someone else. But the legal documents in my filing cabinet proved it was real. The restored woods proved it was real. The new HOA protocols proved it was real. I'd faced down an overreaching HOA, exposed a con artist, held people accountable, and protected my property. Not bad for a quiet software developer who just wanted to enjoy his coffee and his woods in peace. And that peace, hard-won and properly documented with verified surveys and legal judgments, was mine to keep.